job expansion, higher energy prices, on and on and on. The challenges facing this country are many, and we have much work to do. At this time, I'd like to yield so much time as you may consume to the distinguished chairman of the subcommittee, the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Kingston.
I thank Mr. Womack for yielding, and I wanted to make a couple of points that I think are very important, Mr. Chairman. Number one, the only budget that has passed is the Ryan budget. The Democrats, for all the crying, have not passed a budget. The Democrats are the majority party in the Senate. The majority party in the Senate, the Democrat Party, rejected President Obama, another Democrat. They rejected his budget by a vote of 97-0. Now, what did Harry Reid and President Obama do after that? Nothing. That was it. Went to the House, no problem. Where's the leadership? I guess it's the same place the jobs are. We're still looking for it. If the Democrats were concerned about balancing fiscal responsibility and some of these vital programs which we're all trying to work through, then why aren't they working on a budget? That's point number one. Point number two, this bill increases food stamps $5.6 billion in the school lunch program, $1.5 billion. It also increases from the committee mark, WIC, $147 million in the DeLauro amendment. It will not be offset by the Obama WTO cotton agreement, but it will be offset. That amendment is intact as respects WIC. Number three, the big oil. Well, when the Democrats were in charge of the House and the Senate and the White House, if they were concerned about tax cuts for big oil, why didn't they go after them? What they did do is extend the Bush tax cuts, which I voted against. If they were concerned about the Bush tax cuts for the wealthy, why did President Obama and the Democrat House and the Democrat Senate extend them? I would ask you that, Mr. Speaker. What this bill does, as respects WIC, it funds it at a level of $8.2 million in participation. Should it go up to $9 million in participation, which is higher than the current level, there are three contingency funds that will pick up the difference. We have reduced WIC, as did the Democrats. The Democrats cut WIC funding $562 million. I have the vote right here. For those Democrats who are forgetting how they voted on it, they might want to look. But they voted to cut WIC funding. Therefore, the contingency fund is not as high as it could be. So if we want to talk about all these things, there's lots to talk about. But one thing that's very important for members to realize is that no one's going to fall through the crack. And I keep hearing about how this is going to starve people. WIC is $42 a month. That's why WIC isn't the only program for these people. That's very important for everyone to remember. I don't even think most members, if you gave them a pop quiz, could say what WIC is, but because it sounds like it's thousands of dollars a month. But I don't believe $42 is anything more than a supplement. Yet that supplement will still be there because, again, Mr. Chairman, we have funded this with an anticipated level of $8.3 million. But should it go up to $9 million, it has been trending down, but should it go back up, the contingency funds will be there that will pick up the difference. And I thank Mr. Womack for his time.
Encourage my colleagues to support the underlying bill, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Time of the gentleman has expired. For what purpose, gentleman from California rise?
Strike the last word.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
I want to respond to my...
Gentleman will state his inquiry.
And I say this in good spirit to my friend, but I believe you have to ask for unanimous consent to strike the last word twice.
I haven't.
And well, the gentleman has it. The reason why I said that is I might be inclined to ask for it myself, and I wanted to be sure.
Mr. Chairman, this is the first time I've asked for it.
I stand corrected, but you understand why I was asking. Thank you.
Members are reminded to address their comments to the chair. Gentleman from California is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise because I want to respond to my chair that I respect deeply, but I think there's a sort of misstatement of fact here. The only budget that's ever been balanced in the last 20 years has been the budget that the Democrats did. And we did an unholy thing that just the other party can't accept, that it's going to be absolutely necessary to balance any budget, and that is we had to increase revenues. And what did we do? We closed the tax loopholes on the richest families in this country and corporations. We closed loopholes. And with that revenue, and we made a lot of cuts because we also dedicated revenue from those loophole closures to pay off the deficit. And guess what? We paid it off. We paid it off ahead of schedule. And when the Clinton administration left town and the Bush administration came on, had an $800 billion surplus. And what immediately did they do? They repealed the mechanism that was balancing the budget and said, no, we'll just we'll give back those tax loopholes to the richest people in the country. And then we go to war. Whenever in history we've gone to war, people have paid for it. Not these wars. We just put it on the credit card. So, Mr. Kingston, you know, let's be factual about being Democrats being in charge. We were able to balance the budget, something that your party hasn't done. And just on this whole WIC thing, we all know that the administration administers the program and has to estimate how many people are going to be in need. That's the way we put together these big budgets, whether it be Medicare or WIC or other kinds of things. And last year what we found out is that the estimates were not needed. So in fact there was a surplus, but it was based on fact after the fact, not ahead of time. This year the economy's down. We've heard many speakers talk about the impacts in their districts of the number of people that are unemployed and are seeking benefits like this. And I think the chairman himself has indicated that almost 50% of the children in this country are using one or more of these programs. So this idea that this cut can be sustained when it's based on a guesstimate, and a guesstimate that didn't take in, one, the rising food costs, and two, the number of people who are still unemployed, and frankly, people that are underemployed, including members of the military and their families who depend on these WIC fundings. So I just want to put it in some kind of perspective here that the budget has been balanced by this party and paid for and left in a surplus, and the fact that the guesstimates on these WIC cuts are going to do more to do harm than to do good. And I'd yield the remainder of my time to my colleague.
I would reinforce what my colleague from California said, but there is a repetition on the other side of the aisle that somehow there are contingency funds and carryover funds which can be used if there is a shortfall. You may continue to say it, it continues to be wrong. And this is, again, the Center for Budget and Policy Priorities. The estimates reflect the use of all contingency funds as well as the use of the carryover funds from fiscal year 2011 to close funding shortfalls, and the funding level would still result in the large participation cutbacks that have been outlined. There are no contingency funds and no carryover funds, and no matter how many times you say it, that money will not materialize. I thank the gentleman.
Yield back.
Gentleman yields back. For what purpose, gentleman from Connecticut rise? Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Will the gentleman yield?
Will
the gentleman yield for just 30 seconds?
30 seconds.
I just want to make sure that my friend, the ranking member and the former ranking member, knows that the contingency fund data that we get did come from the USDA. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to tell you about a young woman. Young woman's name Sarah. She actually lives in a shoreline community in Connecticut in Representative DeLauro's district. She's got 4 kids. She was playing by the rules, did everything that we asked. She had a good job in purchasing. And last year she got laid off like thousands of other Connecticut residents. And she has 4 kids, ages 7 to 15. And since that day, she has been confronted every day with a decision. She's got about enough money to put 1 meal on the table for her kids. They'll get 1 meal while they're at school. And so she makes the decision. Does she put breakfast on the table to make sure that they have food in their bellies when they show up to school? Or does she put dinner on the table when they come back? That's her daily challenge every single day. Now, she gets a little bit of help from a food bank, from a soup kitchen around the corner from her. A soup kitchen that likely gets money from the Emergency Food Assistance Program, one of the programs that is cut 25% under the President's proposed budget. That's her daily reality. Let me tell you a story about another American. His name is Tony, and he lost his job last year as well. He was the CEO of a big oil company, and on his way out, he got about a $1.6 million salary payout and a $17 million pension payout. He might be spending part of his summer on his yacht that he's nicknamed Bob, might be sailing in the J.P. Morgan Asset Management round the aisle race like he was a summer ago as one of his oil rigs collapsed in the Gulf. And his struggle is that he's only been able to raise about $1.6 billion for his new oil exploration venture around the world. You know, Franklin Roosevelt said this. He said, "The test of our progress is not whether we add more to the abundance of those who have much. It is whether we provide for those who have little." Now, I have listened to my friends on the Republican side try to create a choice here today, that because our children later on are going to have to pay back the debts that this country owes, that we have to sacrifice the lives of kids who are living today. That's a false choice. The two are not mutually exclusive. The fact is we are making choices in the budget right now. We are making choices to give more and more money to the defense budget, which is already over-bloated, and cutting 25% from the Emergency Food Assistance Program. We are handing another $40 billion subsidy to the oil industry, and we're cutting back funding for the Commodity Supplemental Food Program. And as the Republican budget calls for, we are further cutting taxes for the richest 1 or 2% of Americans. Well, we underfund the WIC program that gets badly needed nutrition to kids like Sarah's kids. In my district, the story is the same. We've got 17% of households in my district who have reported going hungry. At the Friendly Hands Food Bank in Torrington, they've had a 40% increase this year. At New Britain's Municipal Food Pantry, they've seen 100 new families come through the doors this year. And they are watching with horror as we try to create some false choice between feeding kids today and protecting this country's fiscal situation down the line. You know, when I meet Republicans and Democrats in my district, regardless of their political persuasion, they want this body to start working together to solve the biggest problems in this country. But I have news for my Republican friends. They want us to solve Sarah's problem, not Tony's problem. This budget, this bill, is a travesty, and I urge a no vote. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. For what purpose, gentleman from New York rise?
I move to strike the last word.
Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Let me thank Congresswoman DeLauro and, of course, Congressman Farr for the work that they're doing. Here we go again. I rise in strong opposition to the underlying bill. This bill reduces the amount of funds awarded to public nutrition programs such as SNAP, WIC, and many other programs that lend assistance to families in economically disadvantaged communities. This session of Congress has really been tough on those that are in need. First, our nation's seniors are threatened with potential cuts to Medicare proposed by the Ryan budget. Now, hunger programs for women and children are being targeted. It is a tough year indeed, but let me tell you now, I was not sent to Congress to sit back and watch these crucial programs be cut. I came here to fight for their existence, and I don't plan to stop now. I will not sit idly by as we destroy programs upon which citizens depend on the most to pay for $45 billion in tax breaks for millionaires and billionaires. It is a shame and it is a disgrace. And for people to try and stand here and justify as to why we're doing it, it just does not make any sense at all. If we get rid of tax breaks for millionaires and billionaires for 1 week, just 1 week, I'm talking about 7 days, we would pay for the entire WIC program for 365 days. Mr. Speaker, I'm greatly disturbed by the negative impact this bill will have on those individuals who depend on public assistance to feed their families. It is projected that the expected funding cuts will result in 350,000 people losing their WIC benefits. Nearly 50% of the babies born in this country each year rely on WIC. On top of that, it is cost-effective, serving nearly 10 million people each year and costing less than $100 per person. I don't understand why we want to stand around here and try to hustle backwards. That's what they say in my neighborhood. We need to make certain that we do what's right and going to benefit the young children. Let's not forget that we're here to serve and meet the needs of our nation. Supporting this bill would be a great disservice to those who elected us to Congress. Supporting this bill will significantly cut the funding to programs that feed thousands of families. Supporting this bill will lead to the devastation of many hunger programs. There are many families who depend on government funding to put food on the table every day and every night. Voting in support of this bill will only make their lives more difficult. I urge all of my colleagues to vote no. This bill does not help those that are in need. It protects the millionaires and billionaires with their greed. On that note, I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentlelady from Florida rise?
I move to strike the last words.
Gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, when you're born, you get a birth certificate. And when you die, you get a death certificate. And that dash on your tombstone in the middle is what you've done to make this place a better place. I rise against this bill in strong opposition. I can't believe that the Republicans are attacking the disabled, the seniors, and now the children. You know, I really do believe the scripture, to whom God is given much, much is expected. And they really do expect more out of this Congress, the People's House. You know, I may be the only person in the House with any institutional memory, because it seems as if no one remembers that we didn't get in this mess 18 months ago. No, when President Bill Clinton left us, he left us with a surplus. And then we had 8 years of what I call reverse Robin Hood. You know what I mean. You got to be a certain age to know who Robin Hood was. But robbing from the poor and working people to give tax breaks to the rich. Now, my colleagues talk about the fact that the president insisted on passing that $780 billion, not just for the rich and the millionaires, but the billionaires in December. And everybody was slapping themselves on the back. What a great job, because we didn't raise the taxes on the average American. And I would have voted not to raise it on the average Americans, but I knew that in April we were talking about cutting funds, pension funds, and now cutting funds for the children, the babies. It is inconceivable that we will cut funds to WIC, providing food for new mothers, babies, and children under 5 years old. Nearly 50% of the babies born in our country is on the WIC program. In my state of Florida, as many as 19,000 people are affected, would be affected by this cut. You know, Lawton Childs, former governor of Florida, former senator, used to have a slogan, "This dog don't hunt." Folks, this dog don't hunt. The American people will wake up and wake up to what you're doing and wake up to the fact that when you have your head in the lion's mouth, the deficit, you got to ease it out. You don't destroy programs affecting children and babies and senior citizens while giving tax breaks to billionaires and millionaires. And the sad fact is, if we put it on the board tomorrow, the Republicans would vote again to give the tax breaks to the billionaires and millionaires and yet leave the children and the elderly people holding the bag. The American people, you need to wake up to what's going on. There is money in the House of Representatives, but you're choosing to give it to millionaires and billionaires. As I close and yield back my time, I really do believe what the Bible says. To whom God has given much, much is expected, and he's expecting more out of the people of the House of Representatives. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentlelady yields back. For what purpose, gentleman from Indiana rise? New Jersey, excuse me.
To strike the last word.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, I ask my colleagues to vote against any language in the Agriculture Appropriations Bill that would seek to cut funding for the WIC program. As you know, the Special Supplemental Nutrition Program for Women, Infants and Children, WIC, makes it possible for vulnerable children to have a healthy start. The Republican cuts will deny many children a chance to receive nutritious food by cutting WIC funding from $6.73 billion this year to $6.05 billion in 2012. This cut is a cut of more than $650 million below the fiscal level of 2011. And this is much less than the continuing cost of the high-end Bush tax cuts, oil company tax breaks, and various other write-offs for well-to-do taxpayers or powerful corporations. If we allow these cuts to take place, approximately 200,000 to 300,000 women and children nationwide will lose WIC benefits next year. In fact, in the state of New Jersey, approximately 4,000 to 6,000 low-income families will be turned away by WIC. This is very alarming to me because these cuts will negatively impact a substantial number of low-income women and children in my district. As a former public school teacher in the inner city of Newark, New Jersey, I witnessed firsthand the effects of hunger and malnutrition on children trying to learn. When they came to school to take tests, they couldn't concentrate. They were unable to really focus on what they had before them. The reality is this: if a child is hungry, he simply cannot learn. If a child is hungry, he is unable to focus in class. What are his chances of thriving academically? If we are serious about closing the achievement gap and ensuring that students are career and college ready, cutting WIC will be in direct contradiction. In light of rising food prices and current unemployment rates, it would be catastrophic to strip funding from this vital program. I strongly believe that by cutting WIC funding, we risk neglecting and preventing children from getting a head start in recognizing the excellence of their human potential. We as a nation are still a great nation. We are the wealthiest nation in the world. We have the greatest ideals and opportunities for people. But I think that we are being short-sighted. We have a problem, and we will deal with it, as we've done for all other problems. In World War II, we had no Navy, we had no Army that was significant. However, we built ships that floated. We train people in 20 and 30 days to rivet and to make our powerful defense mechanism work. And we won the war for the world. We can win this war of the deficit in this country, but not by giving. And I think that even the constituents of my good friends on the other side of the aisle, my Tea Party friends, my Republican friends, go back home and ask people, do you want to pull the food out of the mouths of babes? Because from the mouths of babes oftentimes come gems. And if our nation is going to be a great nation in the world as we are today, we're not going to do it by starving the children and harming the women. It's unconscionable, it's disgraceful, and it's a mark on the House of Representatives. It's representative. It's really something that shouldn't be. Therefore, I urge my colleagues to vote against any provisions cutting funding for the WIC program. Yield back the balance.
Chairman yields back. For what purpose, gentleman from California rise?
Mr. Chairman, to strike the last word.
Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. I strongly object to this bill. In his second inaugural address, Franklin Delano Roosevelt laid out, I think, a very good test for us. It was a test for this nation at one of its most desperate periods. We, too, find ourselves in a difficult situation. We do have a big deficit, and we need to make some tough choices. And today, as we debate this piece of legislation, we are indeed making choices, and we are being tested. We're being tested about our values. We're being tested about what we think is important. Franklin Delano Roosevelt suggested this be the test. The test of our progress is not whether we add more to the abundance of those who have much. It is whether we provide enough for those who have too little. Ponder those words and apply those words to what we are debating and what we will soon vote for or against on this floor. The test of our progress. Add more to the abundance of those who have much. We've discussed many times here in the last couple of hours the options that are given to us on tax policy, continuing to provide subsidies to the wealthiest industry in the world, the oil industry, not to the tune of a couple of billion, but when you add it all up, some $40 billion a year. Whether we continue to provide a tax break to the wealthiest in this nation, those whose annual incomes are in the millions, and indeed some who are even in the billions. We're making choices and we're being tested. That's one option that our Republican colleagues seem to want to present to us. The other option is what we on the Democratic side have been debating and asking for, and that is the second part of what Franklin Delano Roosevelt said, and that is whether we provide enough for those who have too little. I was on this floor not more than 3 hours ago with my granddaughter, 11 months old, and in the arms of mothers and grandfathers and grandmothers and parents across this nation are children of that age who depend upon women, infants, and children's program, which this Republican appropriation brought to this floor reduces by 10%. 350,000 children will not be able to have the food that they need, the care that they need to be able to be healthy, to be able to grow, and indeed in the future to be able to pay, as we will today, one way or another, for the deficit that we have. A 10% reduction from last year. And is there anybody in this House that's prepared to argue that somehow things are better out there and that a 10% reduction, in the face of increased number of women and children who need help, that is a worthy choice for us to make? I think not. I think that this bill miserably fails the test that Franklin Delano Roosevelt laid out during the Great Depression. This does not provide for those who have too little. And it's not just in the Women, Infant, and Children program. Across the board, thousands, indeed 480,000 or so Americans 48 million Americans become ill each year because of food-borne illnesses. And yet in this budget, another 12% reduction from last year's funding for food safety programs at a time when we have a new food safety program to implement. 350,000 Americans wind up in the hospital as a result of food-borne illnesses. And the Republicans want to cut the money to provide the protection for Americans. It's about choices. It's about values. What do you value in this system? Yes, we have a deficit. Yes, we must deal with it. And yes, according to our Republican friends, we must take that food out of the children's mouths. We must make sure that people will not be able to be healthy. I don't understand.
Time of the gentleman has expired. For what purpose does the gentlelady from Wyoming rise?
To strike the last word.
Is there objection to the gentlelady from Wyoming striking the last word a second time? If there is no objection, the gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My colleagues on the other side of the aisle did not produce a budget. My colleagues on the other side of the aisle did not raise taxes on the mineral industry, as they now assert we should. My colleagues ran this House for 6 years. My colleagues ran this House with a Democratic president and a Democratic U.S. Senate. The things of which they argue are the fixes are things you did not do when you were in control of all three, the House, the Senate, and the presidency. I will not yield right at the moment. Without a budget, with the Keynesian philosophy that you attempted to implement, and it was worth a try, but it failed. The massive increases in spending, in social programs, in entitlement programs, the massive increase in spending that amounts to Obamacare, the massive stimulus bill, the massive efforts that you made, all the time asserting that you had something called pay-as-you-go, pay-go, when in fact there were more exceptions to pay-go than the rule ever provided. You took $500 billion out of Medicare. You destroyed Medicare. You destroyed it.
Would the gentlelady yield at this point?
I will yield.
Thank you. If the gentlelady from Wyoming would recall the years past, she would recall what is known as the Senate filibuster, the graveyard of legislation that the Democrats put forth many, many times, died in the Senate as a result of their filibuster. With regard to the issues of entitlements and this particular bill, we're talking here about the issue of how we care for those who have little. I'd be happy to debate with you on this floor or any other place the import of the stimulus program, and in fact, most every economist argues that without the stimulus program, we would have fallen into a Great Depression, not just a very serious recession. I'm sure the gentlelady recalls those words from
reclaiming my
the
time from the gentleman. The crisis is worse than the people realize. And in fact, in some respects, the people are way ahead of us on this, which is why the people of this country chose to elect fiscal conservatives to run this House during the current Congress. And we presented to the American people what we intended to do, which is cut spending. We told the American people we have a spending problem, not a revenue problem. The American people chose to give my party the opportunity to lead and to exhibit the fiscal restraint that the American people voted for in the last election. We are now exercising that fiscal restraint in a way that preserves 87% of the funding level of the WIC program that is currently being alleged that we are destroying. Now, there are millions and millions of Americans who are functioning in this recession on 87% of what they used to make. In fact, we know that small businesses all over this country, who are the drivers of our economy, the creators of jobs, are functioning on far less than 87% of what they used to make. I will not yield. It is time for this House to exercise the fiscal restraint in a way that is sensitive to the needs of the people in this country, that we told the American people in November we would do.
Would the gentlelady yield?
I will yield back the balance of my time, Mr. Chairman.
Gentlelady yields back. The Chair again reminds all members that all remarks should be addressed to the Chair and not to each other. For what purpose does the gentleman from New York rise?
I move to strike the last word, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There seems to be a little amnesia in this chamber today. In January of 2009, we were losing 775,000 jobs a month. Then the Obama administration and the Democratic Congress enacted remedial legislation, and we stopped losing 775,000 jobs a month. We started gaining. We have gained 1.5 million jobs in the private sector in the last year and a half. Not enough, but 1.5 million jobs. But unfortunately, state and local government had to lay off 1.2 million people because we didn't give them enough to prevent that. But we did reverse the result of the Bush policy of 8 years, which was 775,000 jobs a month being lost. Don't forget, in 2000, in the presidential election, the great debate was, what should we do about the $5.6 trillion surplus over the next 10 years? Bush got elected. They enacted the Bush tax cuts, which they said would stimulate the economy and pay for themselves. What happened? We had the slowest economic recovery of any economic recovery after any recession in the history of the United States. The only 8-year period in which we did not gain one net new job even before the 2008 recession, from which we are now recovering, albeit too slowly. The American people did not vote to kill remedial programs last year. They voted for jobs. They were told, vote for the Republicans, we'll get you jobs. We don't see any jobs. So let's forget this revisionist history. I rise in strong opposition to the Republican effort to cut funding for the Special Supplemental Nutritional Program for Women, Infants, and Children known as WIC. This program provides food to low and moderate income mothers, babies, and children under 5. WIC provides the food pregnant women need to help their babies grow. After the baby is born, WIC provides the breastfeeding support or infant formula to make sure the babies continue to develop and to grow. And for young children, WIC provides staples like milk, eggs, bread, fresh fruits, and vegetables. Nearly 50% of the babies born in the United States each year rely on WIC to get a healthy start to life. But in this time of rampant unemployment, the Republicans oppose extended unemployment benefits and now want to assure that the wives and children of the unemployed who don't get unemployment benefits can't get food and baby formula. This bill says let them starve. This bill will mean that 200,000 to 350,000 pregnant women and children will be denied food. Knocking these families out of the WIC program is an about-face on a 15-year bipartisan commitment to ensure WIC funds cover all eligible women, infants, and children who apply. Shockingly, At the same time that the Republicans are demanding that pregnant women and children starve, they continue to promote tax holidays for millionaires and billionaires. If we suspended the Bush tax breaks to the wealthiest 1% of Americans for just 1 week, let me say that again, just 1 week, we could cover the cost of the Republicans' latest cut of $833 million to the WIC program. The debate over WIC funding specifically and the federal budget generally is about priorities. By supporting the Republican proposal to slash WIC funding, forcing thousands of women and children from the rolls, the Republicans are saying that America prioritizes tax holidays for those who need it the least over providing food to pregnant women, infants, and small children. Mr. Speaker, make no mistake about it. This is about literally taking food out of the mouth of babies. This Republican bill is immoral. Food for women and children is more important than tax cuts for millionaires, billionaires, and oil companies. Reject this bill. Reject this bill, and maybe, just maybe, the Republicans, given enough time, will find their consciences. I yield back the balance of my time.
Chairman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Colorado rise?
To strike the last word.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, it's remarkable at the theater that we see. Looking throughout America, throughout my 3rd congressional district, at least Colorado, I see people that care about their families, care about our children. What are they asking for? Jobs. They want to be able to go back to work. And we're seeing far too often from the opposition people that are willing not to be a stepping stone to American success, but to become a stumbling block, to have us rely on another government program. The proposed cuts, these are minor. These are minor in the sense of the real life that real Americans are living today. Come with me. Come with me and walk through my district. I have communities that are not in a recession. They're in a depression. They need to be able to get back to work. What do I hear as I walk through those communities? From city councils, county commissioners, small business people are saying that they are being inhibited from being able to get people back to work so that they can take care of their children, Mr. Speaker, so that they can take care of their children by oppressive government regulations, by people who are not willing to allow us that opportunity to live that American dream. I see, Mr. Speaker, an America that can rise again and become the economic power that we all know that it can be. But this will not happen as long as we try to build reliance on government rather than the rugged individualism that has made this country great.
Will the gentleman yield?
In just a moment, ma'am.
Thank you.
We have an opportunity. We have a challenge. The question is, will we rise to meet that challenge? We have a $14.4 trillion debt in this country. Let's put that in a little bit of context. You know, last night we saw the NBA Finals. You had LeBron James, maybe one of the best basketball players the world has ever seen. He signed for $40 million a year to play basketball. Well, if he wants to earn just $1 trillion, he's going to have to play basketball for 25,000 years. This is the burden that we have put on the backs of our children and our grandchildren that they can no longer afford. The recipe is not the Keynesian economics that my colleague has brought up. The answer is going to be found in the very solutions that made us the richest, the freest, and the most powerful nation on the face of the earth.
Will the gentleman yield?
That is going to be the free enterprise system. Let's encourage it. Let's get our people back to work. Let's create those opportunities once again.
Will the gentleman yield?
I will yield to the lady.
I thank the gentleman. I would just talk about rugged individualism, and I would just quote to you from the Citizens for Tax Justice. 12 corporations, largest corporations in the nation, pay effective tax rate of negative 1.5% on $171 billion in profits.
I reclaim my
they
time,
reap
and I thank the lady for bringing up
in
that
tax
very point, Mr.
subsidies.
Speaker.
This is not rugged individualism.
This is the real challenge that we face, and she points to it directly. We have an oppressive, convoluted tax code that is stripping American business of that opportunity to be able to create wealth in this country. Let's simplify that tax code. Let's not punish success
Let's
in this
get them
nation,
to pay their fair share of taxes.
Let us reward
Members
success in this nation
Gentlemen
once
will
again
suspend.
and be able to get our people back to work.
Gentlemen will suspend.
Right. LeBron James is going to get a tax cut.
The House will be in order. Gentleman from Colorado controls the time. Gentleman may continue.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. These are the challenges, and we have very distinct choices to be able to make. Will we continue to follow the pathway to poverty of government programs, government taxation, government solutions, or will we follow that expressway to real enrichment in this country by getting the American people back to work? Mr. Speaker, I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. For what purpose, gentleman from Georgia rise?
Mr. Chairman, to strike the last word.
Gentleman's recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I really want to thank Mr. Delora and Mr. Farr for their wonderful, unbelievable work. Mr. Chairman, I rise in opposition to the underlying bill. Mr. Chairman, nutrition program did not run our economy into the ditch. Nutrition program did not drive us into debt or stop the banks from extending credit. But my colleagues want to cut programs that feed millions of women, infants, and children. Who is next? I asked you, who is next? The Republicans went after seniors' Medicare. Now they're going after the babies. Who is next? Mr. Chairman, the work program is a necessity. It is a lifeline. It is our obligation. This is not the way America treats our seniors. This is not the way America treats our mothers. This is not the way America treats our children. This is not the America we want to live in. If we repeal tax breaks for the wealthy for just 1 week, we could pay for this entire program. Make no mistake, this bill will reduce the number of people served by nutrition programs. Right now, almost 50% of the children born in our country rely on these programs every single day, every week. They serve almost 10 million people each year. My beloved brothers and sisters across the aisle know that, but they should also know that this bill would mean empty shelves at food banks and smaller portion at dinner time, and not a dent in the deficit. Make no mistake, this bill will not hurt people, will hurt people. It will reduce the number of people who receive assistance, the poor, the sick, the mothers, the little babies. They didn't overspend our credit card. They didn't do it. They didn't overspend our credit cards. Why are we doing this? Why are we punishing? Why are we cutting the WIC program? It is a lifeline. No one in this country should have to go hungry. It is not right. It is not fair. It is not the just thing to do. It's not the good thing to do. The Atlanta Community Food Bank in my own district in the heart of downtown Atlanta is distributing 35% more food than last year. That funding will be cut as well. Countless people already on the waiting list. One such man in my own district, Johnny Battle, this man worked all of his life and he worked very hard. Mr. Battle is 71 and his wife is 76. He can't look for work because his wife has fallen ill. He is her caregiver. I said we should be that caregiver. We should look at We should look after those who are suffering through no fault of their own. They receive immersion food assistance from Antioch Baptist Church when they can and receive only $16 a month in food stamps. Assistance from the food bank would make a huge difference in their lives. 60,000 people depend on the Atlanta Community Food Bank to make it through the month. We cannot allow more people to be pushed into the waiting list like Mr. Battle and his wife. Mr. Chairman and my colleague, our country is hurting. Our people are hungry. They need our help. This is not how America treats her children. This is not how America treats her seniors. This is not how America treats her little babies, the mothers. I urge all of my colleagues to vote no. And with that, I'll yield back.
Gentleman yields back. For what purpose, gentlelady from Ohio, rise?
Speaker, I rise I move to strike the last word.
Gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes.
Rugged individualism. Oh, am I glad the gentleman brought that up. Rugged individualism produces a heartless bill like this. Now, if you look back to why we're in the dumpster economically, go back to the 1990s. Read Alan Greenspan, a great advocate of rugged individualism, and Ayn Rand, right? Just drive him into the ground. Make all of his friends rich. J.P. Morgan Chase, Wells Fargo, Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley. It's an interesting group of characters up there. They took America to the cleaners. They took and outsourced our jobs. Now they took our home equity. And now it's getting so bad, we even have a bill that's going to take food away from about 350,000 women and children. Now, whose fault is that? Here's a little note from somebody in my district. She says she signed up this plate at the food bank, the local food bank. She said, without help from the food bank, I would be on the streets. I struggle every day to make ends meet, so my kids have a place to lay their heads at night. I have a job, but with 2 kids, it's still very hard. I have a lot of trouble paying rent and bills. I just wish there were more help to parents like myself. That's from the rural part of my district. From the urban part of my district, a plate is signed at the food bank. My income is spent on bills which leave very little money for me to purchase food for myself and my 2 daughters. Now, you know, the majority of people in this House are Christian, and I'm not pushing that, though I am one of them. But the first beatitude says, feed the hungry. It doesn't say rugged individualism. I'm as individualistic as anybody else in this chamber. But I'll tell you what, there's a heartlessness that goes with people who take everything for themselves and turn their back on the rest of the American people. So when big oil makes record profits and pays no taxes, there's something really wrong. There's something really wrong with the country. And the American people know it. They didn't clean house here last November because they thought you were better. They just wanted a change, and they'll vote for it again if their lives don't get better. And their lives won't get better unless we fix what Alan Greenspan and Goldman Sachs and Bank of America and the whole rest of those buzzards up there did to this country. And they're taking bonuses. In fact, they're making so much money, they take members of Congress out. You know, the average amount of meal, $193. $193 a plate. These folks, a couple bucks in a day they spend on food. So I stand with the American people, not those wealthy interests who took the nation to the cleaners. You know those hedge funds? They pay at a 15% tax rate. Mrs. Loomis talked about businesses in her district. They pay at a 35% rate. Why don't we hold those accountable up on Wall Street for what they did? Let them pay their fair share of taxes. We couldn't even take 1 penny of their bonuses. Not a penny. This was the most gutless institution. And I'll tell you what, the real straw that broke the camel's back was 1998, when Glass-Steagall was thrown out. an act that had separated banking and commerce. And you know the name on that bill? There wasn't a single Democratic name. It was Graham, Leach, Bliley, all Republicans. And they shoved it through this House. I didn't vote for it. And then Wall Street, oh my gosh, you talk about rugged individualism. They hurt the Republic. They hurt our country, and they have not been held accountable. George Bush's chief of staff had Mr. Bolton. He came from Goldman Sachs. He was there. He was there in the fall of 2008 when the Treasury was just opened up to him. Isn't that an interesting coincidence? Very interesting when you look back and see what really happened. I refuse to have the people of my district or any district pay for what they did. I got people who are lined up in our food banks because of unemployment, and I know who caused it, and I don't have enough power to hold them accountable, but I hope God does, because what they've done is unforgivable. Their rugged individualism is unpatriotic, it is unchristian, and it hurt this country. If I take a look at the bill before us, if we look at the cuts to seniors in the Commodity Supplemental Food Program, I move to strike the last word.
Is there objection to the gentlelady striking the last word a second time? For what purpose, gentlemen? For what purpose,
Reserving
gentlemen?
my right to object, I want to say to my friend, the ranking member, that I understand the passion on that side and the number of people who want to start speaking or who have been speaking, but if we're going to start speaking twice, then I hope you will give me the courtesy of speaking twice. So I just want to mention that. Well, I've just been informed Ms. Lummis spoke twice while I was going to the restroom. So once again, I will sit down and as I had, if I could continue on my reservation, I want to explain to my friend from Ohio that I was concerned about members speaking twice, but I understand that you've done that now with Ms. Lummis, so I certainly will not object. And
I thank the gentleman.
So I withdraw my objection.
Without objection, the gentlelady from Ohio is recognized for an additional 5 minutes.
I thank the gentleman. I thank you for yielding. We may not agree on everything, but I think if we agree on some of the history that brought us to this point, maybe we can do something right for the Republic, and certainly for those people who are lined up across this country as victims of the abuse that came from that rugged individualism for which there has been no justice. There has been no justice to this date. What a sad thing for us to say institutionally. If we look at this bill, nearly half of the babies born in our country rely on WIC, the Women, Infants, and Children's Food Program. They're in every district in this country. And I can guarantee you, for all the big shots that cleaned up at the expense of the American people, they've never even been to a WIC site. They've never even sat with moms. They've never sat with families trying to figure out how they're going to make it from the beginning of the month to the end of the month on the few pennies that they have to live on. So I think that the sad fact of this bill is that rather than big oil paying their fair share of taxes, rather than us taking those bonuses from those who truly don't deserve them because of what they did to the Republic, for all the tax breaks that are going to companies that are locating jobs overseas and taking our livelihoods away from us, the answer isn't to take food away from those people that are paying the price. So I want to thank my colleagues, and particularly Mr. Kingston for not objecting, to Mr. Farr for the great job you've done in trying to bring some justice to this bill, and to say in closing that there are many people who talk about life. Without decent nutrition, the children who will be affected, the hundreds of thousands of children who will be affected in this bill, their brains won't grow as fast. They won't have the kind of nutrients that produce strong bodies and strong minds for the future. This is the time to stand up in defense for those who are defenseless, and particularly with this economy, the last place to cut is food. Every Christian in here knows that's true. We need to do better as this bill moves forward. I urge my colleagues to vote no on the bill on final vote, and I thank my colleagues for yielding the additional time.
The gentlelady yields back the balance of her time. For what purpose does the gentlelady from Hawaii rise?
Mr. Speaker, I move to strike the last word.
Gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes.
I rise in opposition to the underlying bill. Ours is a compassionate country. We have leaders who can put themselves in the shoes of Americans who are struggling, doing their best. We have compassionate leaders on both sides of the aisle. This is why it is so inexplicable that the underlying bill, as well as bill after bill brought by the Republican majority to this floor, make cut after huge cuts to people's programs, not corporate programs, not programs that hit Wall Street, but people's programs. And again, today, in this agricultural spending bill, we are targeting cuts that hit women, infants, children, and seniors in Hawaii and nationwide. In my district in Hawaii, 19.5% of our residents experienced food hardship in the last year. Let me repeat. Nearly 1 in 5 people in my district did not have enough money to buy food that they and their family needed in 2010. Today's bill would cut crucial nutrition programs for thousands of Hawaii's most vulnerable and hundreds of thousands all across the country. And while the richest in our country continue to get billions in tax breaks and the oil companies continue to get their billions in tax breaks, why are we balancing the budget on the backs of women, infants, children, and seniors? First, today's bill makes a $650 million cut to the Women, Infants, and Children WIC nutrition program for fiscal year 2012. This would cut as many as 350,000 eligible low-income women and young children from the program. WIC provides nutritious food, counseling on healthy eating, and health referrals to pregnant, postpartum, and breastfeeding women and their children under age 5. This program has had well-documented success in improving nutrition and health of families in poverty, which has reduced low-weight births, anemia, and hunger. Let's put ourselves in the shoes of 350,000 women and their children who depend on this program. Second, the Emergency Food Assistance Program supports food banks on all of our islands and across the nation to support the hungry. And I have visited many of the food banks in my state, in my district, and we know that there is a growing need. There are many, many more families now relying on food banks. And yet, this bill cuts $12 million from food banks at a time of great, great need. Let's put ourselves in the shoes of the hundreds of thousands of families all across our country who are relying on food stamps. Third, today's bill cuts 20% from the Commodity Supplemental Food Program, which provides food packages to over 600,000 people nationwide, and 96% of these recipients are low-income seniors. You've heard others say ending tax cuts for millionaires and billionaires for just 1 week alone would save $866 million. That is enough to support poor women, infants, and children for the entire year. And when we say this bill, brought to us by the Republicans, literally takes food from babies to give tax breaks to millionaires and billionaires, we are not engaging in hyperbole. This is what is happening in this bill. Let's get our priorities in order. Balancing the budget on the backs of our most vulnerable is totally indefensible when we are giving tax breaks to those people, the richest people in our country, corporations that are making billions of dollars. It's indefensible. And where do we live? Do we live on Wall Street? You know, people who want this bill, I think they live on Wall Street. Well, those of us who are opposing this bill, we live on Main Street. That's where the majority of our people live. They live on Main Street. They expect us to support those people, working people, families, women, and children all living on Main Street. I urge my colleagues to oppose this anti-people, wrong-headed, downright cruel cuts to low-income women, infants, children, and seniors all across our country. I yield back the balance of my time.
Yields back. What